You know, I've been trying, but I can't get past the plot aspect. 8 years down the line and 4 rewrites, and it's just not happening. I don't know where the story is going anymore, and I don't feel like I can just wing it. Any advice there?
There's a few ways you can go about writing your webcomic. You can plan everything to a T, have your story worked out and script completely written. Now, this is probably the right way to do things when making a comic. But having everything buttoned up before you even start drawing your first page can really dull the excitement of creating your story. That's why I started improving my webcomic. I usually don't know what's going to happen 5 or 6 pages down the line, but it's more fun that way that I don't know what's going to happen next. So how do we get our comic to a point where you can improv, where the characters decide what happens next, where your story's going to end up writing itself? Well, let's start off with making a timeline. And on this timeline, we're going to put little dots on it. And these little dots are going to represent the plot points that we're going to want to hit throughout our story. Let's zoom in on this first little part, and that's going to be our chapter 1. And in this chapter 1, we're going to put even more little plot points that we're going to want to hit in the first chapter. Once you have your characters and your conflict introduced, let the characters advance the story. Now, what would they really do in this situation? Now, whatever it is, it needs to be something that gets them to your next plot point. Now, since this is your first chapter, everything's going to be a little tighter with a little less room for improv, because you've got to introduce your characters, and you got to introduce the conflict. You're going to have to do some actual writing. But after you have your character introduced and they're on their way to become the class president or the greatest fighter in all the land, you can just start throwing situations and other characters at them and just seeing their reactions, seeing the characters' reactions. Now, writing a story this way might make you a little nervous because you might end up accidentally writing yourself into a corner every now and again. But that's not a bad thing, because being written into a corner, it forces you to be more creative to get yourself out of that situation. And whatever crazy, wacky idea that you come up with might actually be a really great payoff for your story. Now, you don't need to improv in order to write your story. It's just the way that I write my webcomic. And however you end up writing your webcomic, you just need to keep in mind that it doesn't need to be perfect, because few things are perfect on the first try. It's a learning experience, one that I'm still going through right now. So don't worry about an airtight, by-the-book story or plot holes. Just have fun. Now, when I decided that I wanted to try to make webcomics, I did what many of you probably did and Googled how to make webcomics. And I think the most useful advice I came across was just make webcomics. So instead of making your first go at this thing your magnum opus, treat it like it's your learn to make webcomics webcomic. If you have a story in mind that's near and dear to your heart, you might want to save it for the next time, once you get this stuff figured out. If you need to come up with a story for your comic, make one from scratch. Just watch some TV, listen to some music for inspiration, or go to TV Tropes and check out the list of plots. They got a lot of plots over there. Hey, thanks for watching. I'm hoping that you're realizing that this isn't a by-the-books how to make webcomics series. It's really just my experiences with making my own webcomic. You can read my webcomic at badmusiczombies.com, and you can follow me at Nasaki on Twitter. Sometimes I tweet. See you next time.